Hello everyone, this is Tetrafolium, and I'm here today to talk about um, one of the most compatible Pokemon that you could put on your stall team. Uh, Alright, here's the rule. You can use the copy pasta, but you have to, like, change it, alright? We're not talking about compatibility with humans, okay? This is Vaporeon, who is a Pokemon that took a big hit due to the Speed Pass ban in many people's minds, but I'm hopefully going to spin the narrative that there's more to Vaporeon than the Salac Pass strategy. Um, and I'm going to be focusing more on the defensive qualities of Vaporeon. I know some people have the opinion that Vaporeon's not good defensively. In fact, that it's a lot better offensively. And I think that is fair if you have that opinion, but I don't know. Me personally, I like defensive Vaporeon. So, as far as the viability rankings go, surprisingly, or maybe not that surprisingly, honestly, Vaporeon is ranked number 40, right next to Ninjask, who is another Pokemon that took a big hit due to the Speed Pass ban. I would not be shocked if both of these Pokemon take a little bit of a tumble, but personally, I still think that Vaporeon's pretty good. Um, is it as good as, say, like Porygon 2? I'm not sure about that, but I still think it's better than Blaziken. Sorry, all Blaziken fans out there. Uh, so, I think it's about in the right spot anyway. But let's not get too bogged down in viability rankings. I will be doing a viability ranking stream at some point soon. It may even happen before this video is released, so if it has, go check it out, and if it has not, then I'm hoping to see you there. But our comment question for the day is, which is your favorite evolution? For me, I think it's probably gotta be Sylveon. I didn't really like it that much when I first saw it. I was like, this isn't what I had in mind. I wanted it to be a ground type evolution, but then I started playing with it and I was like, wow, I really like this. And, bulky fairy types in modern gens, going like 6, 7, 8, 9. They're some of my favorite Pokemon to use competitively, and Sylveon is definitely that for me. Vaporeon's about as close as you get to that sort of gameplay in this generation for me, so I actually don't dislike Vaporeon that much. And would I say it's my second favorite? I guess so. I mean, it's between that and Umbreon. They're all really good, except for Leafeon. I hate Leafeon. Water. It's a defensive boon. Mono Water is just a really good defensive type. I'm sure we've all heard the phrase bulky water before, and if you haven't, then, just read the title of this video. We're going to explain why water is such a good defensive type, and it has a lot to do with these weaknesses and resistances. You're only weak to grass and electric. Electric is a type that is somewhat common as a coverage and as a stab, particularly Zapdos, Jolteon, Raikou, Electabuzz, are running around in the tier and throwing out those stab Thunderbolts, or if you're flanky, stab Thunder. And a handful of other Pokemon will run electric coverage. Sometimes Tyranitar runs Thunder, sometimes Jirachi will run Thunder or Thunderbolt. A handful of other Pokemon have Thunder Punch's coverage. It goes on. But electric is a type that is not super difficult to switch into because it is completely ineffective at hitting ground types. So if you pair a water type Pokemon on a team with a ground type Pokemon, then you can switch between the two and cover each other's weaknesses quite well. I mean, you also see that water resists water and ice, which are two of the types that hit ground very nicely. Now, they do both share a weakness to grass, and grass can be nasty for that type of defensive core. However, grass is also one of the weaker attacking types in the generation. The strongest grass type move that you're commonly going to see is Hidden Power Grass. So, yeah, there's not a lot of diversity there, and very few Pokemon get access to any other types of grass moves. Giga Drain is really the only other one. And it's got 8 PP, so you could PP stall it, especially if you have a Pokemon like Zapdos with pressure on your team that can easily switch into a Giga Drain. Though, there are a handful of other options like Leaf Blade from Sceptile, although Sceptile is a pretty mediocre Pokemon. And I guess technically there's Frenzy Plant, but I mean, come on. Are you really going to use Frenzy Plant on Venusaur or Meganium? Razor Leaf is actually not terrible. It's weaker than Giga Drain is, and both are weaker than Hidden Power Grass, though. So basically, what I'm saying here is Electric and Grass, if you're going to pick two types to be weak to, you could pick a lot worse. As for the resistances, though, Fire and Ice are extremely common as coverage moves. Think about how many Pokemon run Fire Blast or Ice Beam who are not themselves Fire or Ice types. Like Salamence, Blissey. That's it. No, I'm kidding. There's plenty more. Suicune will run Ice Beam for sure. Tyranitar. There's a lot. I'm not going to list the entirety of the generation. And then Water is also a decently common attacking type. It's not like... I wouldn't say it's the most threatening, per se, although Suicune is a very dangerous win condition, and we're going to be talking a lot about Suicune in this video, so those of you who are big Suicune fans, keep your ears peeled. And then Steel. Steel resistance, like I say, for Pokemon that are weak to Steel, it's not really like being weak to Steel, it's more like being weak to Metagross, but Metagross is really good, and being resistant to Metagross is also really good. It really helps to have a sort of bulky water on the team that can help you out in the Metagross matchup, because your other rock resists, like your ground types that have good defense but don't necessarily resist Meteor Mash, you want to save them for Tyranitar and Aerodactyl, if you can, or Salamence even. So, like, you don't want them to be just taking fat Meteor Mashes from Metagross all day, so having a water type can be really nice for that as well. No immunities, but we will talk about some immunities that some water type Pokemon get. If you're familiar with Vaporeon, you should be very aware of what we're going to talk about, but those of you who don't, just stay tuned. Water pairs really well with ground. That was a lot harder to say than I thought it would be, since that dual combination of water and ground is only weak to grass. So yeah, you get that 4 times weakness to grass, but like I kind of mentioned before, when Hidden Power Grass is the strongest move that they've got to hit you, it's not that bad. And there are also just not that many great grass types in the tier. Celebi, Breloom, I guess Venusaur, I guess Sceptile, and Breloom doesn't even really run grass-type moves, so yeah, overall, not too bad. And you get that immunity to Electric as well, so you don't even have to worry about Pokemon like Zapdos dropping Thunderbolts on your water type, though you do have to worry about that coverage HP Grass a little bit. You do lose your resistance to Ice, which is not fantastic, but you get a resistance to Rock, which is really good. Losing the resistance to Water is not preferable, and getting a resistance to Poison in its stead, like, that's basically a fake resistance. No, there are very, very few Poison-type moves being thrown out in the tier. The only Pokemon that really does is like Weezing with Sludge Bomb, maybe sometimes Venusaur with Sludge Bomb as well, but yeah, it's fake, and you don't want to be taking Sludge Bombs because you're gonna get poisoned. So yeah, but you still retain your Steel and Fire resistances, so that's really nice. Now let's talk about some of the bulky waters in ADV. And now this is not a comprehensive list of all Pokemon that could be considered a bulky water in any way, shape, or form, but these are the 3 that I think most people have in their mind when they say bulky water in ADV. No disrespect to Starmie and Gyarados, who have pretty good defensive stats in their own right, but these are the 3 that come to my mind. And then we're throwing Vaporeon on here too, just as a point of comparison. So we're going to talk about their defensive profiles, their offensive profiles, and their base speed, just all their base stats. But we're going to split it up a little bit so that it's not so much information. So starting off, all of these Pokemon have some pretty nice HP stats. Milotic is the worst at 95, but that's not like completely unsalvageable by any means. I think if of all the Pokemon to not have at least base 100, Milotic is probably getting away with it the best because of a move that we're going to talk about in the not too distant future. But the rest of them, like having that 100 HP to set substitutes, can give them a lot of variety in their sets. Vaporeon in particular with 130 HP, which is like shockingly high, does not even need to run that much HP investment to get the magic 404 number. I think you only need 12 EVs. So, I mean, that's not bad to get. And you get a lot out of that because Blissey is extremely pressed to remove a substitute from Vaporeon. If Seismic Toss doesn't get there, most commonly the second attacking move that it will have is Ice Beam, and that's resisted, so you're not breaking Vaporeon's sub with that. Very rarely you might see Thunderbolt, which could break the substitute. And by very rarely you see Thunderbolt, I mean on a set that has Seismic Toss on it. Of course, Ice Beam plus Thunderbolt is decently common on Blissey, so that could get there. But if it isn't that set, Blissey's not breaking that sub. Similar things can be said for Suicune, and even to an extent Swampert. Although most of the substitute Swampert sets are not even really running max HP. They're mostly running max speed so that they can get the Salak and play around with Endeavor. But nevertheless, there's still some interesting utility there. As far as the raw defenses go, though, Suicune's definitely got the best mix with 115 in both its physical and special defense. Swampert 90s in both is not bad, but it's not great. In fact, it's the lowest of the special defensive Pokemon here. But 90 is pretty good for its physical defense as compared to Milotic and Vaporeon sitting at 79 and 60 respectively. That means that they're probably going to have to invest a lot of EVs into their defense in order to take physical hits the way that you would hope that they could. But that's okay for Milotic because it's got a 125 special defense. Doesn't really need that much help in that department. Whereas Vaporeon, Swampert have pretty solid special defenses, but not necessarily the most fantastic. I mean, Vaporeon is not that pressed because it's got a really high... Excuse me, that was a rare sneeze by Tetrafolium. Yeah, I don't know. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, Vaporeon and its HP and Spadef. I mean, you don't even really need to invest in that either that much to take special attacks well, because you're just naturally so high. Though, it is nice to get a little bit of Spadef investment if you're looking to live something like a Thunderbolt from Jolteon, or the like. Though, I don't know what exactly you're doing back, so maybe pump the brakes on that. Where Swampert is, I mean, it's just fine. Like, 190-90, a lot of Pokemon wish they had that. And like, to even question, like, is this even that good, is to put it next to Suicune, which is literally, like, the gold standard for defensive profile in the game. So, yeah, that's going to do it for defensive. We're going to briefly talk about the offenses, because sometimes if you can kill something before it does big damage to you, then that is really good for your defense. And, yeah, none of these Pokemon have really impressive attack stats other than Swampert with the 110. But that's kind of okay, because Suicune, Vaporeon, and Milotic don't even really get good physical move pools. Like, yeah, you get Double Edge, and maybe some of them get Body Slam, but, like, and Return, but, like, okay, that's all normal coverage. Who's really that pressed for normal coverage when you have a stab type that hits rocks? Like, and steals for neutral. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't think that there's. I don't even know why I'm thinking about normal in the context of hitting rocks and steals. Obviously, you don't want to use normal type moves to hit those. Yeah, I'm not sure. You're hitting grounds for neutral as well. That's probably the important one, because normal is commonly used to hit grounds for neutral damage. But yeah, you don't really need help with that. So yeah, Swampert though does make pretty good use of it, because it has Stab, Earthquake, and it has access to Curse as well. Vaporeon does as well, but I don't know if I would necessarily recommend that. Curse is going to help out with Swampert doing even bigger damage if you so choose, but I think it's absolutely perfectly fine just the way it is. In fact, most of the offensive Swampert sets don't even run any attack investment. They just rely on that really big base attack and base power of Stab, Earthquake to break through what it needs to. As for the special attack, though, Swampert's not faring quite as well. It only has an 85. That's not completely terrible, but it isn't that good. In fact, Suicune's 90 is also not really that good, but when it's bolstered with Calm Mind boosts, yeah, I don't think you'll complain too much. And Milotic has a really respectable 100, but look at that. Vaporeon is actually pulling ahead with 110. In fact, there are very few Water-type Pokemon that have a higher special attack stat than Vaporeon. I think Gorbis has 114 and Amistar has 115. There may be another Pokemon that is higher than that, but I don't think so. Clamperl, I guess, with the Deep Sea Tooth, but, like, alright, come on, that's Clamperl. So, I don't pay too much respect to that. So, this 110 is going to be really important, though, to look at some calcs later. So we'll keep it in mind. And finally, the base speed. Suicune's the fastest at 85. Milotic is actually pretty fast as well at 81. That's a little bit surprising to me. I didn't think it would be so fast, but I don't know. I guess it's like pretty Gyarados, so it has the same base speed as Gyarados. I don't know. In fact, does it have the same stat configuration as Gyarados? Just like, or the same numbers, just configured differently? I'm not sure. Somebody look into that for me. I'm gonna guess the answer is no, but it is kind of interesting. Vaporeon's at 65, which is kind of good. It gets you a little bit faster than some of these like lower mid tier speeds. It helps you out with, say, Tyranitar, for example, who's sitting at 61. You can outspeed it if you so choose. But then we have Swampert, who's sitting at 60, which is on the slow side, I would say. With the Salak boost, it actually gets to 360 max, which is just 1 point slower than max speed Starmie and Raikou, if you're going to opt for that Endeavor set. But 60 is good enough to threaten certain things like Blissey, or like the really slow Pokemon, like your base 50s and lower, like your Reggies and Snorlax and all that. So, not completely bad. But yeah, these Pokemon have some pretty solid stats, especially in their bulk, so keep that in mind. But that's not the only thing that helps with your bulk in Pokemon. Sometimes your moves are going to be important as well, and I want to highlight some moves in particular. So first, Refresh. This is a move that gets rid of your status condition, so you don't have to worry about Burn and Toxic chipping you down indefinitely. So the two Pokemon on this list that get it are Swampert and Milotic. Both tend to use it. I mean, Swampert drops it more commonly than Milotic does, but both are pretty good with it. It means that they're good at countering like really passive Pokemon that don't have a better move to hit them than Toxic. So that's really nice. Wish is the sole property of Vaporeon here, which is really nice because it makes it a really good cleric. It can pass the wish to teammates to heal them up, but it can also keep that wish for itself, and it commonly does want to keep the wish for itself, as it's not sand immune, nor is it spikes immune. It is going to be taking a lot of passive damage throughout the game, so it's got to keep its health up. Yes, Leftovers is going to offset the sand, but it's not going to help to cut into chip damage that's dealt by attacking moves. So say like Vaporeon takes an Earthquake for 35%. Well, you're not going to get your 6% healing to take effectively 29 damage. You're going to keep that 35 in the sand. So that adds up. You're going to need to get that wish and then protect and then sort of wish loop to get yourself back up to full HP. So not super easy to pass the wish, but that's fine. Keep it for yourself. You're a great Pokemon with a lot of defensive utility. And then Recover. This is the move that I was alluding to earlier for Milotic. Recover is probably the best recovery move you can have, which, like, no duh, but 32 PP and just immediately getting 50% of your HP back, like, that is a lot of longevity right there. You can get essentially 16 more lives when you think about it. So yeah, that's a lot better than Revival Blessing in future generations, right? But it is really nice for Milotic in particular because it doesn't have technically it's I mean, it's competing with Vaporeon for this, but like the worst at taking physical hits because it's lower HP and lower defense. But because it's got Recover, it doesn't really feel like it's that much worse than Suicune or Swampert. In fact, in some instances, you could argue it's better. Like, who would you rather have facing down a Metagross, right? Well, okay. Assuming that the Swampert doesn't have Earthquake, then I think Milotic makes a pretty good case because of Recover. So, this is not the only Pokemon that gets Recover, though. Starmie gets access to Recover. It also gets access to Refresh, but I don't think you should use Refresh on Starmie because Natural Cure is good enough for getting rid of the status, and you could use that move slot for a lot of other things like Thunder Wave or a coverage move like Ice Beam or Psychic, or even Thunderbolt, Rapid Spin. Like you have too many moves to be putting Refresh on Starmie. So that's your Starmie mention for the video. Now let's talk about the ability Water Absorb. This is one of the things that sets Vaporeon apart, as we're going to see, but there are plenty of Pokemon that get Water Absorb. What Water Absorb does is it gives you an immunity to Water-type moves, so you can never take damage from a Water-type move, but you're also going to get 25% healing when you're targeted by a Water-type move. So, say you switch in and Surf is coming down on your Vaporeon, well, you're just going to get 25% healing. That's going to offset 3 layers of spikes right there. So that could be really nice if you're positioning around certain Water-type attackers on your opponent's team. And this ability by itself straight up counters mono water attackers. So that would include things like your defensive Starmie, who basically the only move they have to hit you is Rapid Spin, which is like, that's basically nothing. I mean, you can get hit with Thunder Wave, but as we'll see with these Pokemon or discuss with them, like, there are plenty of strategies to ignore status or mitigate the effects of status into the end game. There's Surf Defensive Swampert, which is running Surf, Toxic, Protect, and Refresh. Sometimes runs Roar over Refresh, but regardless, its only attacking move is Surf. Defensive Roar Suicune will only be running Surf because it's got Calm Mind and Rest as its other two moves. Crocoon, also known as Rest Talk Sleepcoon, or Rest Talk Suicune. I always want to say Sleepcoon. That does... I need to break that habit. It is designed to basically get momentum while it's asleep still. You're using Sleep Talk to roll potential Calm Minds or Surfs to do damage to your opponent. And Milotic is very commonly not running any other attacking moves. Sometimes it can run Ice Beam, but its most common set is going to be the same as Swampert, basically, where it's Surf, Toxic, and Refresh, but with Recover rather than Protect. So here are the Pokemon that all have Water Absorb here. There are, I guess, technically Poliwhirl and Poliwag that have Water Absorb, but they're not fully evolved Pokemon, so we're going to ignore them for the sake of this. But yeah, Vaporeon, Lapras, Quagsire, which I've done a video about. Mantine. I've heard some people pronounce it as Mantine. Let me know what you say in the comments. I tend to say Mantine. Politoed, also known as William. I'm not going to explain why, but from now on, if I say William, you know I mean Politoed. And Poliwrath. So, yeah, wide variety of Pokemon. None of them are OU ranked. Vaporeon's the highest at UUBL, but Lapras and Quagsire are at least UU, so they're not, like, wholly terrible, I guess. The rest of these Pokemon, yeah, they're not as good. But that's not to say that they're not useful in some contexts. The context that we want them to be the most useful in is the matchup against Suicune. Suicune is a really tough Pokemon to deal with. A lot of new players find it really difficult to take on a last Mon defensive Suicune because it's not super common that you can have moves that 3-hit KO Suicune while it's sleeping, especially if there's no sand up. And if you don't, then Suicune can effectively rest loop. Because it's got pressure, it's going to run you out of PP as you attack it. And because it's got Calm Mind, it can boost up its special attacks so that you can't really beat it with special attacks. And boost up its special attacks so that it doesn't really need any investment to just sweep through your team with Surf. So there are definitely more counters to Suicune than simply the ability Water Absorb, but Water Absorb is one that helps out. Though, that's not to say that having Water Absorb by itself makes you a Suicune counter. There are more sets than just a defensive Suicune with Roar. Sometimes Suicune will run Ice Beam. So, while a lot of these Pokemon resist Ice, not Quagsire and Mantine, but when you're at +6, it's still doing a lot of damage. So there are some countermeasures to that. All of these Pokemon, Vaporeon, Mantine, William, and Poliwrath, have access to Haze. So Haze is a move that resets all stat boosts. So that can be something that will help you out against a Suicune who's relying on getting all the stat boosts to win the game. There's also Roar, which is an option. Both Vaporeon and Lapras have Roar, but I want to mention that it's not going to help you against a last Mon Suicune. So while yes, it can help you out versus Suicune in the mid game to stop it from sweeping early. It's not going to help you against a player who positions themselves down to Suicune as the last Pokemon on their team, because you can't phase it out if there's nothing to phase into. So, I want to give a special mention to Lapras that while it does not have Haze, it has a quad resistance to Ice, and because it's an Ice type, it's immune to Freeze. So it's actually not that bad for Lapras to be your last Mon to handle this Suicune. You can just kind of rest loop on the Suicune, and like, yeah, as it uses up its Ice Beams, which Ice Beam only has 16 PP, Rest has 16 PP as well, so Lapras should be pretty good at 1v1ing that particular version of Suicune. Quagsire doesn't really have access to any of these options. It doesn't even get Recover this generation to help offset some of that damage. So Quagsire is actually, despite the fact that it has Water Absorb, not a fantastic Suicune counter, because any Suicune that has Ice Beam is very likely to muscle through the Quagsire. You need to get ahead in Curse Boosts if you want to beat a Suicune with Quagsire. And that's not even to mention that Suicune could run another set, which kind of beats all of these Pokemon pretty well. That's the offensive variant. So this variant is very commonly running additional moves that make it hard for these Pokemon to indefinitely wall. In particular, Hidden Power Grass. Now, not all of these Pokemon are weak to Grass. In fact, well, Mantine is the only one that's not. But that doesn't really help you, per se. Or I should say that it's not going to be a surefire way to beat Suicune. But there is another Pokemon that does really well into this particular offensive Suicune set, and that is Blissey, who has fantastic special defense, really high HP, and if this Suicune doesn't have Rest, you can just Seismic Toss down and beat it. So that's really nice. Yes, like +2 Hydro Pump is threatening some big damage on Blissey, but hopefully by the time that it gets to +2, you've landed a lot of Seismic Tosses, or you've landed a Toxic or Thunder Wave or something to cripple the Suicune. So the combination of Suicune and a Water Absorb Pokemon is really nice at taking out a Suicune. I should say more so the combination of Blissey and a Water Absorb Pokemon, maybe that isn't Quagsire, because Quagsire is not that good into the Ice Beam defensive variants. But Vaporeon is actually really good when paired with Blissey, which is going to be the crux of the rest of this discussion, I think. And the reason why is access to Wish. It means that Blissey doesn't have to have Wish, which means that it can do something else. But before we get too deep into that, let's talk about the Smogon sets for Vaporeon. And I'm not going to show literally all the sets, because like 3 of them are basically the same with just slightly different moves. Almost all of the Vaporeon sets have this spread here. Sometimes maybe 252 HP and you steal 4 from your Spadef. But this sort of idea is to kind of maximize your bulk. It doesn't really maximize your physical bulk, but it gets pretty darn close. I don't know exactly what the 32 Spadef is for. I'm sure that it made sense at some point, but I want to proffer this. Against a +6 defensive Suicune, which means no special attack investment, Vaporeon will need 248 HP and 56 Spadef to live a crit Ice Beam plus a non-crit Ice Beam plus Sand. Why does that matter? Well, if your strategy to beat a Suicune in the endgame involves Wish looping, then you need to be able to like take a crit into a non-crit, basically. Because if you get crit and the next Ice Beam just kills you, then like you lost your answer to that Suicune, and if you don't have another answer to Suicune on your team, which is like, how many answers to Suicune do you need, man? If you're running Vaporeon, then you're kind of screwed. So there you go. That's what you need if you're relying on a rest looping tactic. Now, the rest looping tactic is not foolproof because you could get frozen, and if you're frozen for long enough, then it doesn't really matter how much damage the Ice Beam is doing. It's gonna kill you eventually. So, yeah. If it's sandless, 248 HP with no Spadef is sufficient for living crit Ice Beam into a non-crit Ice Beam. So that's kind of nice. Your moves here. Oh, actually, you know what? I might have done my math wrong because I don't know if I factored in. No, I did factor in the leftover healing. Never mind. I'm doubting myself. I need to stick with my preparation, right? This is the advice that I'm giving you if you're interested in tournaments. Stick to your preparation. So, the moves that you're commonly going to see on these defensive Vaporeon, Surf is almost always going to be on there. It's your best stab. Well, I mean, you have Hydro Pump as well, but that doesn't really fit the pace of a defensive Vaporeon all that well. Vaporeon wants to sit in and like be alive for a lot of turns, and Hydro Pump only having 8 PP is not very conducive to Vaporeon getting a lot of value later into the game. So yeah. Plus, you don't have a lot of Spatak investments, so you're not really threatening all that much damage. Wish and Protect are very commonly seen together. Doesn't always have to be together, but it does help you out because you can set the Wish and then you can Protect so that you're not taking damage on the next turn, and then you get your Wish to get your HP back. It means that Pokemon that are threatening like 3-hit KO range on you can't really outpace your wishes, so that's really nice. And Protect can just be a really nice move for scouting certain things like Choice Banded Pokemon, or if a Pokemon's going to use Explosion on you. Substitute is a decently common move on Vaporeon. It's also really common on the offensive Vaporeon spreads. It pairs really well with Baton Pass. Like we kind of mentioned before, Vaporeon can very easily hit the 404 magic number for Substitute, which means that its Substitute will not die to one Seismic Toss, which means that you can Baton Pass that against a Pokemon whose best move to hit you is Seismic Toss, like for example Blissey, and get a lot of value out of whatever's in the back. Toxic is decently common on Vaporeon. It is just really good at forcing progress on Pokemon that don't have the means to remove the Toxic. Ice Beam is also an option. I think Ice Beam's really nice if you're particularly weak to Salamence, but Toxic is also pretty good into Salamence, so I don't think that you necessarily need to have Ice Beam. It kind of depends on the pace of your team and how quickly you need to kill a Salamence off. Like if you have literally nothing else on your team that takes +1 Salamence on, then yeah, maybe Ice Beam is more pressing. We already talked a little bit about Baton Pass there. Really good with Substitute. It's also good with Wish because you can set the Wish and then Baton Pass the next turn. If you're slower than your opponent, Vaporeon will take the hit, which is usually good because Vaporeon's pretty bulky, and then you can give the Wish to something else on your team, maybe something that was a little frailer, maybe something that didn't want to switch directly in, and then it gets the Wish. You could also do it in reverse, where if you're faster than your opponent, you can Baton Pass to something that takes a hit and then gets wished back up to full HP. So that's pretty good synergy there. And then we have Haze and Roar, which is to help mostly with these boost sweepers. But that's not the only thing that we can do with Vaporeon. I'm going to touch briefly on offensive Vaporeon. I'm not going to get too in the weeds with it. The Smogon sets don't even really talk much about offensive Vaporeon, but it is something that has been more in vogue in the recent years of the ADV. Because Vaporeon has a really high base 110 special attack stat, it is really threatening to a lot of lead Pokemon, particularly Tyranitar. With no plus nature but max EVs, Hydro Pump is going to guarantee kill your offensive Tyranitar spreads, particularly the ones that don't run any like significant amount of HP investment. With a modest nature, you're pretty likely to kill the bulkier variants of Tyranitar, which do run a lot of HP investment. This is something that, if you watch my Starmie video, even Starmie is not super duper capable of doing. We threw a Mystic Water on there to get an additional 10% damage, and that's not guaranteed to kill a Tyranitar. Now, neither is Vaporeon, but I guess we could also slap a Mystic Water if we're really that desperate, but I don't know if I would recommend that. I think I would just take this about 70% roll. So that's really nice. Another thing that Vaporeon is good for, which I don't have on the slide here, and it used to matter a lot more back in the Salac days, is that you can take a Thunderbolt from Zapdos and hit it with an Ice Beam, and then it puts you into Salac range, so you'll be faster than the Zapdos, which means you're threatening to kill it with the next Ice Beam, and then you could also Baton Pass that speed boost. But we're gonna talk about why that's not a thing anymore in a moment. Before I get too far ahead of myself, though, the typical spread for Vaporeon is 16 HP, 252 special attack, and 240 speed, either modest or timid. I had a question a little while ago when I was looking at certain teams. I'm not going to say exactly what team it was, but I noticed it on the Bennett team that Jimothy Cool likes to use, which I believe was built by a player named Colin. So shoutouts to Colin. And that Bennett was running 227 speed, and I was like, what is that for? Like, you are not outspeeding anything that is running like a typical spread. It's actually, I think, for this offensive Vaporeon spread with a modest nature, because 240 speed, I think, puts you either at 225 or 226. So 227 is just a bit faster than that. So that's kind of interesting. I don't know how common it is to see offensive Vaporeon, especially nowadays. So I don't know if the 227 speed tier is really like that real anymore. But it is kind of interesting. I'm not gonna lie. So I've been kind of talking about this berry here, Salac, which boosts your speed when you're below 25% health. It's not banned as an item. You can still certainly use it, but you can't pass it with Baton Pass. And this is one of the things that people who are anti-banning Baton Pass, or sorry, Speed Pass, were kind of bringing up. Is like, well, this Vaporeon strategy it's not broken, and it's not like degenerate or uncompetitive. It's not like you can't play around it. And it was a really cool niche that Vaporeon had. And like, it's not that Vaporeon was the only Pokemon that could do it, but it was it was like the Pokemon that could do it the best, because it's threatening out lead Tyranitar. Metagross doesn't even really want to stay in versus Vaporeon, because it's not very consistent at beating the Vaporeon, and Vaporeon can do a lot of damage back. Zapdos doesn't really beat Vaporeon either. It has to crit or get a paralysis to stop the Vaporeon. Mence doesn't want to stay in. Like, it had really good lead matchups. I think the only lead matchup that it didn't really like was Suicune. But, like, even then, you could set if it wasn't an HP Grass Suicune, you could set up a substitute and just pass the dry substitute. So, like, it was really interesting as a lead, and it enabled a lot of offense teams, but you can't really do that effectively without that threat of the speed pass. So, there's still plenty of room for offensive Vaporeon. I think you could just use leftovers, run this spread again, and you can pass dry substitutes. That's not that bad. It's actually kind of still used in certain chains. I know that Belly Drum pass has been talked about and theory crafted a little bit and practiced as well a little bit on ladder. I think that it's not nearly as consistent as Speed Pass, so I don't know if it would be something that we're going to see topping ladder in the near future. Although, when there's a null, there's a way. So, null, I'm sure you're going to break it. Or Spreak, or maybe even Jonald. The Dark Triad, you might call them. Although, let's not have some slander on those, because Spreak is my captain, so I gotta stay true to my captain there. If he wants to break the metagame in half, then more power to him, I say. But we're going to talk about this particular variant of defensive Vaporeon here. This is basically foregoing any special defense investment, and the reason why I'm justifying that is because I have the move Haze. So any of these Suicune that are going to be causing problems for us, if they're getting too high in their boosts, like they're getting to +5, +6, where critical hit ice beams are going to be a major consideration for me, I'm going to use Haze to stop them. And Haze does go through substitute if you're worried about that. If you're worried about, oh, what about the substitute variants of Suicune? No, we don't have to worry about that. This set is really simple in its design. You've got basically max HP and max defense to give you the best odds to survive physical attacks. Haze is to slow down progress of boost sweepers, in particular Suicune and Salamence. Salamence does not have good odds to two-shot Vaporeon unless it gets its boosts going. And if you can haze away all the Dragon Dance boosts, then you can kind of put Salamence in an awkward loop, especially if you have a Pokemon in the back that can live a +1 hit from Salamence, or because Salamence will have to get that Dragon Dance up, and then you switch to that Pokemon on that Dragon Dance turn. Salamence does not kill your Pokemon, and then your Pokemon punishes the Salamence in some way. Blissey is usually the idea there. This is going to need some help from Blissey to counter all the Suicune sets, particularly that offensive Suicune. It also really helps against Pokemon that would threaten Vaporeon out, in particular Zapdos and Raikou. Jolteon as well, but I mean, you don't need exactly Blissey to handle Jolteon. Jolteon's a little bit on the weaker side. Though it does help for that. So, sorry, I'm slandering Jolteon here. I'm very Vaporeon pilled this episode. We're hating on other evolutions. And it's good for passing Wish to its teammates. And a reason why I put in parentheses Aroma Bliss. Aroma is really nice at removing toxics from your Vaporeon. It also appreciates having another Wisher on the team, because that means that Blissey doesn't have to be the Wisher, which means that it can run Aroma, because Blissey is not able to run the combination of Wish and Aromatherapy, or Heal Bell. So, that's good to know. It's the breeding mechanics and the event moves mechanics of Gen 3 are a little bit confusing, but it makes sense when you're steeped in it. You could also run 31 IVs in attack if you want to. That's going to help if you get down into a struggle war and you need your Vaporeon to outdo damage on your opponent. It's not super duper necessary. It's not like the set doesn't work if you have 0 attack. And Vaporeon also just has a really low attack stat anyway, so it's really difficult to like pretend that it's gonna make a lot of progress with its struggle, but you could do that if you want to. The speed investment that we have is actually for minus speed Claydol. Minus speed Claydol will get to 167, so it doesn't really take us any amount of investment at all to get to outspeeding that, so I think that's worth it. It's also going to outspeed Umbreon, who has the same base speed as us, but also doesn't tend to run very much speed investment. And we'll also outspeed any like no investment versions of Tyranitar, Swampert, or Weezing. So yeah, that's all really nice. And this is the team structure. So if you're familiar with other players, this is going to look very similar to a version that Nexhawk and another player named Bird Lives have. But this is sort of my approach to it. So this is basically V5 Dusclops. We could argue about this not actually being V5 because we have Vaporeon instead of Milotic. But I would argue that it could be any bulky water in that slot. I mean, the ones that make sense are Milotic, Suicune, and Vaporeon. I don't think that, say, for example, Swampert would make all that much sense there. But that I think it's Skarmory, Blissey, Claydol, Dugtrio, bulky water is what makes it V5 in my book. So I'm kind of got a more liberal definition of this team. But we have Dusclops on the team, which is another Pokemon I could have made a video about, but I think we could do a little bit more with Dusclops than what I'm doing with it on this team, so we'll save it for another time. So Dusclops video coming soon, TM. Dusclops is a bulkier spin blocker, and it's going to help us out versus Snorlax in a lot of cases. I don't have the most hardcore Dusclops countering Snorlax set, but it is going to help us, especially against utility lags. The rest variants are going to be the problem child for us, but we have some tools to handle that. The rest of the team is basically just going to be V5, and I've covered V5 on this channel before, I think in my Registeel video, as well as my Golem video, so you should be a little bit familiar if you've watched me before, but if you haven't, I mean, this is a very common team structure. It's one of the sample teams. It's called Virgin 5 with a 5 over the G, just because of the person who was playing it. That's what they named it. The lead Vaporeon is going to bluff like a cheesy baton pass offense. This was the team that I was using during the suspect ladder. So it was, I think, a lot more effective then. I think it's still effective now, but it was a lot more effective then because lead Vaporeon was communicating like some kind of like cheese pass shenanigans. So sometimes players would make some more aggressive plays on turn 1, expecting the Vaporeon to do things that like this Vaporeon's not going to do. So like that could be good. I can't tell you how many times they would just lead their Tar in to try to break a substitute and get smacked by a Surf. And like they wouldn't even do that much damage back because I have a lot of defense investment. So, and you know, things like that could still happen today, I think, but probably less likely. We're really good into Tar, Mence, and Meta leads with this Vaporeon. In fact, that's why I'm choosing to lead Vaporeon, is because of Choice Banded Metagross. I think a lot of times these teams tend to lead like Blissey to help out with Zapdos, which makes some sense because like Zapdug can be brutal. But I'm actually a little bit more scared of Metagross. I don't want to get boomed on Skarmory. The whole point of this team is to try to... You really want to keep Skarmory... You really want to keep all your pieces alive, but Skarmory in particular wants to stay alive to get all the spikes down, and then we stall out from there. Dugtrio has to find some entry points to eliminate some weakened threats, so you do want to play kind of aggressively with the Dug. We have a kind of bulky Doug, which can live a Blissey Ice Beam. It can also live a Tyranitar Earthquake if it's Jolly Tyranitar. So that's kind of nice. I'm not saying that you should just be hard switching in all the time on Tyranitars and Blisseys and whatever, but you do have to make some aggressive plays. I think Nexhawk and Bird Lives both actually lead Dugtrio with this 6. They're more concerned with getting the weather clear, which is totally fine and definitely a way to play this team. It might even be the optimal way to play this team, but I'm Tetrafolium and I just like my comfort safety strategies, and I don't like Dugtrio lead because you have to switch out so frequently. In fact, Bird Lives even switches out against lead Tar, which is really strange. I need to pick his brain on that if he's ever around. If Claydol can remove the spikes and Doug can remove sand with Sunny Day, then most end games can just be stalled out. Like you have the tools to just run your opponent out of PP and win the game. And that being said, this is a really slow-paced team. This is pretty much as close as ADV gets to stall. I guess there are some teams that are even slower-paced than this, but that is what it... I mean, it's kind of superfluous. I've played many 100-plus turn games with this team, and we're going to see maybe a few of those. So be prepared to play some long games, and also be prepared to watch some long games, because we're going to get really long here. So let's get into this scene here. We're going to switch up the music a little bit. We're going to stick with the Gen 4 theme. The Team Galactic Commander theme, I think, is one of the better boss themes in Pokemon just as a whole. So, yeah. You might see the names here. We have Uzgak Azdaz. You're saying, who the hell is that? Well, actually, that was me on the suspect ladder. I was using a alt with an unrecognizable name. I literally randomly generated names so that nobody would know that it was me. And there you go. So if you faced Uzgak Azdaz somewhere on ladder during the suspect, that was me. So congratulations, and sorry that I probably took you to 100 turns. But we're just going to get into it. This is probably going to be a longer video. Whoa, hold on. Yanma lead. I forgot about this. It's going to be a little bit of a longer video. I've been kind of sticking to one video a week pace as of recent, in part because I've been really busy, but also in part I think that, you know, I don't want you guys to get burned out on watching my videos, and I also don't want to get burned out on making them, so I think this is a little bit of a healthier pace. If you guys agree with that, let me know. If you actually preferred to have more videos in the week, I'm sure some of you did, you could let me know that as well, but keeping in mind that, you know, you don't want to get burnt out on watching them. I don't want to get burnt out on making them either. I'm not really feeling that so much, so don't be scared by that comment, but just saying. And maybe the trade-off is I could make slightly longer videos here, since there's only going to be one a week. Yeah, Yanma lead. Yanma's a really strange Pokemon. It has speed boost like Ninjask, but it does not have Baton Pass, so I don't really know what it's doing, especially in the lead slot here. Oh, I guess it's just going to go for Hypnosis, and I'm going to slam a Surf into it, and Vaporeon not able to kill Yanma in one hit. Isn't that ugly? And then it's going for Screech, so I imagine it's going to switch to Dugtrio here, and anticipating that, I'm going to switch to Skarmory. That's kind of an interesting tech, but, like, come on, that was so telegraphed. I managed to get 2 spikes down as this Jirachi goes for Fire Punch, reveals that it has some amount of special attack investment, so it seems like it's a Calm Mind variant. If it's Fire Punch and Calm Mind, very likely it's going to be Psychic and then either Wish or Hidden Power Grass. Claydol should be able to threaten the Jirachi with its Earthquake, though, so that's fine. The switch to Celebi on the Earthquake is nice, but I will go to Skarmory, assuming that the Celebi doesn't have too much in the realm of beating me there, and I can get my third spike up. So it's only turn 10, and we have 3 spikes up, so that's really nice. I'm gonna Drill Peck to kill this Yanma, so we don't have to worry about any more Hypnosis shenanigans. But my Skarmory is really low now. And the Skarmory that I'm running on this team does not have Protect, so I'm not able to wish myself up that easily. I switch into the Jirachi Fire Punch and I get burned, which is really unfortunate. So I'm just going to go for an Explosion, which was probably kind of hasty. The idea there was if Jirachi stays into Calm Mind, I boom, and then I can go into Dugtrio and kill it. But we instead get a switch to Suicune, which honestly is not that terrible. And it actually kind of makes some sense why my opponent made that really, telegraphed aggressive play with Yanma early in the game, because Vaporeon is going to shut the Suicune down. And they absolutely need to remove this Vaporeon in order to have a solid win condition. Since I had Blissey in versus the Celebi, I figured that it was extremely likely that the Celebi would be clicking Leech Seed to try to stop my Blissey from making any progress. So I'm going to go hard to Dugtrio, and I managed to dodge the Leech Seed, which is really nice because I get to keep full health on my Dugtrio. They're going to counter trap me, and because I'm a slower Dug, I'm just going to get outsped and killed. Now I can go to Dusclops, though. This is about as free a Will-O-Wisp click as I could ever get. And Suicune is just now going to have to burn the rest. This is a free turn for me as the Blissey to go for Aroma to wake up my Vaporeon. And now it's simply just going to be an issue of PP stalling the Suicune. I don't have any means really of breaking through the Suicune, but the Suicune has no means to break through my team either because I have Haze. Note, Haze does get affected by pressure, so you can't be spamming Haze willy-nilly. The idea, hopefully, for at least the first few Calm Minds, is you want Suicune to use 2 Calm Minds before you Haze it. Yeah. I get a Will-O-Wisp on this Jirachi, which is going to put it on a little bit of a timer here. I'm going to go Blissey, which is going to Seismic Toss down, and it's forcing this Jirachi to have to click a lot of wishes. I think on a turn where I'm pretty confident that Jirachi has to go for a wish, I might be able to get Vaporeon in to Haze. Blissey takes a Psychic there, and Jirachi gets the drop, which is really not nice. Now we're into Vaporeon, who takes a Psychic for... Ooh, that's a lot. Would have been nice to get in on a Wish turn. So now I'm going to have to sack Skarmory. And we're bringing Blissey back in. Get some chip healing. My opponent's just going to rip the Psychics. That's actually, I think, a mistake by my opponent. I know it's a little bit of a 50-50. Because... if I switch to Vaporeon on a turn where you go for a Wish, then I'm making some progress back, but, my Vaporeon is very likely to die to a Psychic, as evident by the previous rolls. So my opponent should have just wished, I think, because now it's dead. I'm going to go to Dusclops, which would be able to kill the Jirachi if it went for Wish, and I don't think I need it going into the end game. I'd rather keep my Blissey healthy. This Dugtrio can come in and try to do some damage to Blissey, but unless it crits, it shouldn't be able to get there, and no Dugtrio is bulky enough to live at 51%, especially with a critical hit. Maybe reveal Lastmon Regirock. Goes for Superpower, which is not strong enough to kill my Blissey. I can just soft boil it again. And then they go for Curse, which offsets all their drops. I'll go for Ice Beam just to get some damage down on the Regirock. Then to Vaporeon, who should take any move from the Regirock good enough. And I think I threatened to kill with Surf. I don't think that crit mattered. Maybe it did. I don't know if it was like a really Spadef-invested Regirock. But that was really nice, I think. I managed to find an endgame where it's Blissey plus Vaporeon, which should just beat Suicune. I don't know if this Suicune has a move to hit Vaporeon at all. But if it doesn't, I can literally just switch back and forth between Vaporeon and Blissey, and then occasionally get a Haze on the Suicune so that Blissey isn't taking too much damage, so that it's not threatened by a critical hit. And then Suicune is going to be forced to go for Struggle, as I have plenty of Seismic Tosses left to finish off the Suicune. So yeah, it would have been a really ugly PP stall endgame there. If my opponent decided they wanted to play it out, they literally would have been there for about 200 turns, doing absolutely nothing to me as I just switch back and forth forever. But that was pretty much a guaranteed win for me. Next game. Lead Medicham. Kind of interesting. I should be able to take a hit really well from Medicham. The only thing I'm scared of is Choice Banded Focus Punch. But as long as I'm clicking an attacking move, I don't have to be worried about it. I will go to my Skarmory on the Snorlax, who Body Slam paras me. And notice the first two Pokemon revealed here. Medicham and Snorlax. What do you think is going to be in the back for this team? It's got to be a Magneton, right? So I'm going to switch out, anticipating potentially a Magneton. I switched to Dusclops rather than Dugtrio. Dugtrio would have been really nice if it was a Magneton switch, but Dusclops hedges the bets in case the Snorlax wants to stay in. I take a Shadow Ball there and go for Will-O-Wisp and just miss, so that's really nice. My opponent is going to go to Suicune as I switch to Skarmory here. And then I'm going to switch back to Blissey, trying to stop potentially Magneton from coming in. Because the Suicune got some boost here, I'm going to have to play to force it to rest so that I can get a safer entry point for something else. I don't necessarily have to do this. I could have went hard to Vaporeon, but in my mind, it's a little bit safer to do something like this, so that I don't get frozen on my Vaporeon. My opponent is going to stay in. I'm just going to Wish, actually, because I should take an Ice Beam pretty well. So much for playing around the freeze, right? But I guess if we're only risking one turn of freeze, versus if I switch hard into Vaporeon, I'm risking 2 turns of it. My opponent outplays the absolute crap out of me and gets that Magneton in on my Skarmory, so that's actually really bad. But I do manage to at least eliminate the Magneton, which is not bad. My opponent also anticipates my switch to Dusclops there, which was really, really nasty. But I do manage to catch her switch to Suicune at the very least. I can go for a Wish, which is threatening a switch back to Dusclops. I'll just take some damage on Snorlax, though. Wish again. And now go to Blissey. I'm going to start laying down the Ice Beams to try to get a freeze. That's the thing with these bulky teams. You have to be willing to play for the hacks to go in your favor sometimes. Yeah. This Salic Medicham was a little bit scary. It possibly could have been a reversal Medicham, but I think with what's been revealed here, this is probably just the banned mana sample team, and I know that that does not have a reversal Medicham in the lead, so I'm kind of fine with that. I'm going to get into Dusclops here to get some chip healing. If I can get Dusclops out of Shadow Ball range, then I can try to get another Will-O-Wisp on the Snorlax, and if I get a Will-O-Wisp on Lax, then this game is just, like, broken down. So, that's fine. I get a critical hit with Surf there, which is pretty good progress on the Snorlax. Now I might be able to beat it down with Surf. I am trying a little bit to play around Boom with my Protects. I don't know if my opponent would rip the Boom if he has it, but could be helpful. I mean, I guess if they did have Boom, they would really want to hit the Vaporeon, right? So the Vaporeon is ultimately what's stopping the Suicune from running away with the game. I go to Salamence here, and I get Blissey in immediately on the Salamence. So that's a really good switch for me because I can go for Ice Beam. And I don't mind ripping an Ice Beam into Suicune. Yes, it is taking away a lot of my Ice Beam PP because of pressure, but if I freeze the Suicune, then I might just be able to, like, completely rip through the game. Unfortunately, my Vaporeon, by virtue of not having Toxic or Ice Beam, does not really have a good way to beat down the Salamence. But that's kind of okay. At the very least, Haze is going to stop the Salamence from being able to get the +2 before Blissey comes in, which is really what I need. Although 75% Blissey is a little bit rough, especially when you get frozen and now you're down to 67%. I'm going to have to switch back to Vaporeon. Now that we're at 2 Calm Mind boosts, though, I can pretty safely go for Haze. Yeah, a chance that I get frozen there, but it's kind of whatever. We're kind of seeing what happens to a Last Mon Suicune in the mid-game here, switching back and forth between the Blissey and the Vaporeon. Yeah, any turn that the Suicune goes for Surf to try to get damage on Blissey, and I switch to Vaporeon is just really bad. I go for a cheeky Seismic Toss there on the Snorlax, anticipating a sort of Shadow Ball click. I go for it again, not anticipating that they would go for the whole self-destruct there, but they do, so that's not great. Although Vaporeon should have the means to break through the Suicune. I get a nice crit on Salamence, which definitely helps. I can just Haze to stop Salamence from getting too far out of control here. Throw up the Wish. I could die to a crit here, but I am just going to take the damage, because I am going to need to beat down this Salamence with Vaporeon to win the game. My opponent goes for Rock Slide, trying to get a flinch. I managed to get my Haze off. Throw up the Wish. I mean, this is pretty rote from here. My opponent is hoping for hacks. Does manage to get a little bit there. But as long as I don't get too crazily hacked, at the very least the Vaporeon can stall out the Salamence. I have not made very much progress on the Mence, though, as you can see. It's at 81%. Okay, but it does miss a Rock Slide there, which gives me a very free turn to try to click a Surf. But because my opponent, I anticipate that they're thinking that, I'm going to pass the Wish to Dusclops. So we played a really long game to get a Wish on Dusclops here, which is really nice. And Mence cannot really afford to stay in, because if it gets burned, then simply Vaporeon is just going to stall out the entire endgame. So they're going to switch to Suicune. Although I do think there's maybe an argument that their best play was to go for Rock Slide, try to get a flinch on Dusclops, and if they managed to get that, then they could have broken the game wide open. Though it's extremely risky, because you're praying for a Will-O-Wisp miss or a flinch from Rock Slide, which is not the most consistent thing. I reveal the funny move that I have on Dusclops, you might think, which is Leer, which lowers Suicune's defense. It's kind of the same idea as Screech on Dugtrio, but because I kind of need Sunny Day on Dugtrio for certain endgames. I've kind of moved it over to Dusclops. I don't think Leer is necessarily the best move. I think Mean Look actually has a lot of great applications, like being able to remove Blissey without needing Dugtrio to do it. But Leer is going to help in this case against the Suicune. And I do call the switch to Salamence to get the burn there. So now Salamence is completely neutralized. I don't really have to worry about it at all. And I can just kind of keep switching back and forth between Dusclops and Vaporeon. Dusclops is like a poor man's Blissey in this case. I am running out of some moves here. Haze still has 48 PP though, because this is a really well-balanced game that is not at all defender-sided. Salamence gets to +2, which would be scary if it didn't have the burn on it. But this is essentially going to be a neutral hit there, and I'm just going to kill this Salamence off. Because what I really want is to get this down to a last mon Suicune situation, so that I can just force the Suicune to use PP, because otherwise Salamence is, like, switching back and forth between whatever these last mons are is gonna, like, kind of force a stalemate in a sense. I'm gonna go to Claydol here on the Metagross. This should be a pretty solid check. I do manage to get Earthquake damage there, which is nice. I will go to Vaporeon. And I think I managed to get a Surf, which is good. I am playing really risky because I have to not get exploded on. And I think I'm even switching to Claydol. That covers Earthquake. It also covers Explosion. If Claydol gets exploded on, that's okay. I just cannot let Vaporeon get exploded on. And it's fine to die to the Metagross, even if it gets the +1, I think. Go for a Protect there. And then I get boomed on. Ooh, so that actually is really bad. I think I should have switched to Dusclops. Although that's kind of risky, because if they go for like a Meteor Mash on the Dusclops switch, that would have been brutal. But that's okay. It's not the worst thing in the world, because I have Leer on my Dusclops. And based on rolls, if I can get this down to -4, I think I'm guaranteed to kill with Dugtrio. Or at least, like, extremely likely. But I only get it down, I think, to -3, which is a roll. But I get the roll on turn 100, so very lucky of me. That was a much closer game than it should have been. I think I made some really bad plays early on. Like, to risk the Skarmory on a switch-in to Magneton like that on, like, what was it, like turn 17, I think I probably should have just got a spike down earlier than risk all that. But it is really, really rough to, when you know your opponent has Magneton and you have a paralyzed Skarmory, to go for that. But I should have tried to play some other kind of game early on. I also could have played that end game around this Suicune Metagross a little bit safer. I think, in fact, when I got that Metagross down to about like 20% with Claydol, that's probably a moment I could have went to Dusclops. I don't know how much Shadow Ball does, but if it did enough, I definitely should have checked that. Alright, I think that's enough of that music there. We're going to go on to a slightly different song here. We're sticking with the Gen 4 theme. Do some of the gym leader music. Alright, so lead Skarmory here. I'm just going to surf into it. It's going to taunt me, and this is sort of what I'm saying about teams playing around like a Speed Pass Vaporeon lead during this sort of era. Like, I don't think that if they knew I was defensive Vaporeon, I don't think they would have set up a taunt on it like that. Although I think they probably could have calced it to see that I was not very attack invested or anything like that. I do take a fat Thunderbolt from this Calm Mind Blissey, which was not cool, but it's okay. I get Thunderbolt Parrot here, full Parrot on my Dusclops, so that's really, really nice. I like that a lot. I will go for Leer here. So my opponent is going to knock me out. Use this as an opportunity to get into Claydol. Unfortunately, I needed -2 on this Blissey for Dugtrio to kill, so that's really bad. But if Gengar's coming in, tells me that you don't have a fantastic switch in to Claydol. I mean, Skarmory's, I think, plenty fine. But they're going to just sack the entire Gengar here, which I don't think that's the play. Okay. I will go to Vaporeon on the Moltres. They switched to Tyranitar. I don't know what they thought I was going to switch to, because obviously you don't want to be a Tyranitar in front of a Vaporeon. I'm going to use this opportunity to get to Claydol. And do I boom here? Yes. That removes the Blissey, and that's really good for me. Because now my Dugtrio in the back can focus on eliminating this Tyranitar. Which is nice. You might say, well, that's a little bit, like, crazy to go for the whole boom like that. Also, that was a crazy switch to Moltres. Might have been crazy to go for the boom while Skarmory's still alive and there's still a spike down, because I'm never going to be able to spin spikes away this game. But I feel like if I could eliminate the Blissey there, then I have a good enough matchup with the rest of my Pokemon that I don't really mind giving up the layers here. I am going to go to Blissey so that I can hopefully remove the burn from my Vaporeon, but my opponent will just go immediately for a taunt there, which is not super cool. I'll go to my Skarmory here, which is trying to stop the Dragon Dance or Tyranitar from getting too far away. I was always roaring there. And then with last two Mons, Tyranitar and Swampert, it could be important for me to get spikes. I will switch there because I don't want Skarmory to taunt me. But kind of heads up play by my opponent to go for spikes instead. Now that 3 layers are down, it is going to be a little bit more difficult for me to make some progress here. But I am going to go to Skarmory because I really, really need to stop this Tyranitar from Dragon Dancing up. So I'm always roaring when the Tyranitar's in. I am going to Drill Peck down on this Skarmory here, just to get some damage. They do switch to Tyranitar here. I am dead to the next Rock Slide, but that's perfectly fine with me to die to Rock Slide, because this is Dugtrio range. And this is, I think, a really big misplay on my opponent's part, because I don't think that the combination of Swampert and Skarmory can win against my Vaporeon. I'm going to go to Blissey, because Earthquake usually means that this is a slower Swampert, so I can probably, at the very least, get myself in a position where I can remove the burn from Vaporeon, because Vaporeon is going to be the key to winning the game. If I got crit with Blissey there, that would have kind of sucked, but I mean, like I said, as long as Vaporeon is not burned, I think I can win the game. And yes, the Swampert is getting a lot of chip healing back up, but Blissey is going to be able to sort of beat down on the remaining Pokemon here. There's not really much that Skarmory can do. I guess it came in to get some chip healing, but I feel like it's more important for Swampert to be healthy. Manages to switch into a freeze, but thaws immediately, so like it doesn't really matter in the long run. I don't think it would have mattered really anyway, whether I got the freeze or not. But now my opponent is playing for a freeze, which is probably the smart thing to do. So I'm going to have to Seismic Toss down to beat this Swampert. I've actually been in this position, I think maybe even with... No, not with this team, but another team, where I lost a tournament game because almost last month Swampert beat my Blissey by freezing it. So that kind of sucked. In fact, I might not even have needed Vaporeon to win this. Blissey might just do it by itself. Yeah, I'm just going to Seismic Toss away, and even if this Skarmory kills, like, certainly Vaporeon just wins. And yeah, okay, so I did all that to remove the burn from Vaporeon, and I didn't even need it, so there you go. I did get pretty high in Elo. If you're wondering, I think my peak was like 1608. If I could have maybe made a push for 1700, just a little bit higher, just 100 more Elo, I think I would have been able to meet the suspect Rex, because I think I was at some point like 28 and 5, which I'd seen plenty of other people with 5 losses make it with the suspect Rex there. It's possible maybe I would have needed to win another game or two by the time I got to 1700, but I think my peak GXE was like 79, so I think if I won all my games up to 1700, I would have made it. Sadly, I'm not good enough to consistently make it to 1700. I think I've only made it once, so made it to 1650 a few times, but 1700 I only made it once, so, and it was not during the suspects, so that sucks. ABR pilled. All right, let's see what your team is. Slacking. All right, that is pretty ABR pilled, but thankfully I have a lead protect mon, so I don't have to think too hard about what to do against the slacking. Fortress coming in. I think that's a somewhat decently common partner with slacking. Don't ask me why. I'm not that well versed on the slacking meta. I don't play with it very much. But yeah, they also have a Vaporeon, so that's kind of sick. I'm just gonna surf, trying to get some damage on this Fortress here. We'll switch to Dusclops here because I can threaten a burn. If they switch to Alakazam, which is alright, I guess that makes some sense there. I go for Shadow Ball. I should have went for another Will-O-Wisp. If I got a Will-O-Wisp off on slacking, that would have been fantastic. And they just predict me, so I'm getting completely smashed by ABR pilled here down to the 1300s. I'm just going to play for a Drill Peck to beat down on the Fortress. But then go Dusclops. I managed to block a spin there, which is really nice. But now I can just simply get a burn. They're going to go to Alakazam, who now has to eat this burn here, which is good for me because this Alakazam has no item, so I'm perfectly fine to like just allow this chip damage to rack up. I managed to get my rest off, and then I'm going to switch out. They switched to Dugtrio, trying to aggressively eliminate my Dusclops there, but obviously they can't really stay in versus a Vaporeon there. We're going to just trade wishes here. I'm going to wish up my Skarmory. They're going to wish up Alakazam. I feel like I prefer my position in this case. I take a Fire Punch and a Burn, so really nice. My opponent is a very skillful individual. No, they were making good plays earlier, but they get a Taunt off on my Blissey. They're going to switch to Slacking here, as I switch to Vaporeon, who stops the Slacking from being able to do much. Goes for Double Edge there, which is... I mean, that's whatever. This is going to be the most obvious switch to Vaporeon here. I'm going to just play it kind of slow and safe, get my wish, pass it to Blissey. So they go to Slacking. I'll go for Aromatherapy to wake up my Dusclops. And then going to go straight to the Dusclops as they just predict me and get a Shadow Ball off, so that sucks. I think I should have went to Skarmory there, in fact. I think it was more important to keep my Spin Blocker than it was to keep my Spiker. I will use this opportunity to try to get some big damage on Slacking, but my freaking Dugtrio doesn't even two-shot, so that's awesome. I'm going to need to play really aggressively into this Fortress, though. I'm going to Drill Peck down on it, but Vaporeon's just going to be able to pass the Wish if it so wants. Oh, it goes for counter there, which is kind of crazy. Goes for counter again, which is not great. I will go for my Dugtrio, though, because this now is in trappable range, and that removes the Fortress, so at the very least, no more hazard stacking for him, and no more spinning for him. So if I can manage to get a spike down with Skarmory, that will make this game go a lot better for me. Just stay in and Surf as Slacking comes in. I go for Protect. Not really much drawback in me going for it, as Alakazam comes in and Encores me into Protect, so maybe a little bit of drawback for me going for that. As I'm going to go into Claydol here and manage to get a spin off, so that's nice. Going to be hard for my opponent to stall out this game. Now they reveal Regice, now it's just like, this either must be an ABR team or my opponent is like smoking something really, really nice. So, yeah. I need to be really, really careful about the Slacking, though, because if Slacking is able to trade, then things get really nasty for me. Thankfully, though, Vaporeon is pretty good at stopping the Slacking from being able to do much because I can just go for my Protects. My opponent gets a Ice Beam off, maybe trying to freeze my Vaporeon. Gonna switch to Blissey. And now there's kind of a mind game here of Explosion into Dugtrio. If they explode, get Dugtrio in, they should be able to kill my Blissey, which is maybe not going to be good for me. I am going to switch to Blissey from the Skarmory, though, because I feel like I could probably find a better turn to get a Spike off. Yes, I could have spiked there, but if I play my cards right, I might be able to get 2 spikes, which would be really good. Anytime that this Vaporeon is going for Wish, I think I'm just going to my own Vaporeon, because I really, really cannot let the Slacking just come in and do what it wants. Managed to pass a Wish off to Claydol, which is really nice. Don't want to pass to Skarmory, because it's really obvious that I could be going to Skarmory with a Wish up. So, yeah. Dugtrio cannot stand to trap my Vaporeon. It does force me to use a Surf, though. Gets a critical hit with the Ice Beam, which is not cool. Gonna switch to Blissey. The idea is, with switching to Blissey while a Wish is up, is that if Regice goes for Boom and gets the Dugtrio in, the Wish is still floating. I think, I'm actually not entirely sure, but I think the Wish would come down on my Blissey, and then Dugtrio's not going to be able to beat me. But yeah, I managed to let the Slacking come in and do exactly what I don't want it to do, which is get a kill. But now is as good a time as any to get a spike down. I'm going to switch to Blissey, because I might be able to get even more spikes down later in this game. Don't have to take the Fire Punch there, per se. Managed to kill off the Alakazam, which is nice, but it does mean that now I have to give something up to the Slacking, and it goes for Focus Punch, which just brutalizes my Skarmory. Dude, Slacking, I feel like it's one of those Pokemon that if I used it, it would do nothing. But my opponent just happens to get the play right every time. So, at least with this spike down, though, I'm going to be able to force progress, because my opponent has to do a lot of switching to make sure that the Slacking is able to do stuff. But, yeah. I'm going for Haze here, which is literally just to waste PP. I'm kind of thinking maybe my only way to get through is for this Vaporeon to run out of wishes. But yeah. I'm making some aggressive switches here. Anytime Regice is in versus Blissey, it is most of the time okay for me to go to Vaporeon. Because if Vaporeon gets blown up on, I think it's got decent odds to protect and then live Dugtrio. Maybe not, I'm not sure. But I think when I calced it, that seemed about right. And Slacking is very commonly going to want to switch in while Blissey is in. Maybe not so much anymore because it's pretty low on its HP, but we're fine. If my opponent would ever go for the boom on my Blissey switching in, that maybe could make some progress for them there. But I do manage to catch the boom with my Vaporeon, who can protect. Going to be above 50%, so pretty likely to live the Earthquake here. A crit would have been bad, but not really much I can do to play around that. But now Vaporeon is living at 17%, which is plenty good enough to survive Ice Beam. I just need to not get frozen. But it's actually kind of okay even if I do get frozen, because I managed to get my wish off first. I would just go for Surf here. I know that it doesn't do anything into Vaporeon, but it's like, if I Surf catching the Slacking switching in, then like it's over for the Slacking. I will go for a Haze, a few Hazes here, I think, so I can save some Surf PP. My opponent is just trying to get the Ice Beam freeze. Sort of identifying that, I go to Blissey, because I'd rather get frozen on Blissey. Can't let the Slacking come in, though. So, anytime a Wish is up, I have to go to Vaporeon. But now that my Vaporeon's frozen, I can go to Blissey here. And it's kind of the same situation, though, because Seismic Toss, after the spike, should be able to kill the Slacking, so you shouldn't be able to get the Ice Beam off. And once this Vaporeon runs out of Ice Beams, then I can go for an Aromatherapy and get back to my own Vaporeon. So we're just going to skip through some turns here. And yeah, now the Vaporeon is out of Ice Beams. At any point that a Wish is not floating, I can go for Aromatherapy. There we go. And now I can get my Vaporeon back in. Although, it's not like it really matters that much. I can keep Seismic Tossing down with the Blissey, if I so want to. I guess the idea that I have here is that I can run this Vaporeon out of Wishes. Although I guess now I switch to my own Vaporeon here, which I don't know exactly why, but yes, it made some sense. I guess I could just keep switching back and forth between Blissey and Vaporeon against this. Eventually, my opponent is going to have to go to Slacking. I think when a Wish is not down, because I will always be attacking while Wish is floating. And yeah, okay, maybe they get a kill on like my Blissey or my Vaporeon, for example, but then Dugtrio comes and finishes it off. Then I use whichever of my remaining Vaporeon or Blissey is alive to stall out the rest of this Vaporeon's moves so that Dugtrio can win the game. And there we go, 1608. I guess that was my peak right there. I think I've slid down. Thank you, Z Panther, for ruining my peak right there, because I did run into Z Panther, who was going for Rex as well right after this game. So not nice. Speaking of ABR, I actually did play against ABR, and I was pretty close to winning. But ABR got a crit on me. Now, granted, I would have had to dodge a lot of crits, But if I managed to dodge them, I would have won. I was not playing this team, I was playing a slightly different one. But yeah. Suspect ladder was a pain in the ass. I'm kind of glad that I don't have to be doing that now, but now I'm in tournaments and that's also a pain in the ass. So stressful, all these games. Should just, like, unwind, play like a game that is less stressful sometime. I don't know. But that will do it for this video. Vaporeon, very cool mon. Maybe one day I'll show off some offensive Vaporeon, which some people will swear is the right way to use Vaporeon, but I'm telling you, defensive Vaporeon's where it's at, alright?